Moses on the mountain, your uncle at the cookout, my taste in women. All in all, we all love a bit of Bush. And President George W. Bush is no exception. Okay, maybe he's an exception. The presidency of W may be one of the most historical and controversial of all time, filled with the highest highs and the lowest lows. And most know that it almost never happened. But what you might not know is that his presidency was almost cut short. And I'm not talking about the time he almost choked to death on a pretzel, though that is very funny. No, I mean getting into another 50-50 election full of personal attacks, terrible ads, and controversy that again came down to just one state. A state that decided the fate of one of the most important presidencies in history and changed the course of America for decades. And also John Kerry was there. But first we have to start at the start of the end of my 2000 election video. Go watch that one too. George W. Bush was able to put Al Gore out the door in the previous election, and now it was time to get to work. He tried to make good on his promises, passing 2 of his tax cuts. He worked hard to get his education reform plan passed, negotiating for it, promoting it across the country by reading to children, and what's that? Oh, fuck. In the blink of an eye, Bush was a wartime president. The country rallied around him, and both parties thought he was doing a bang-up job responding to it. But like your parents, the love didn't last. He threw out the Cold War doctrine of containment and replaced it with preemptive strike, so the US would never be hit first again. And now in his crosshairs was his father's arch nemesis, Saddam Hussein. Bush began claiming that Iraq was not only funding terrorists, but had WMDs for even worse attacks. So with the support of Congress and most Americans, he invaded. While popular at first, after declaring mission accomplished, the expensive war still had no end in sight. No WMDs were ever found, and deaths were rising. Back home, the economy was starting to get shaky as well. Unemployment was way up, and the deficit was higher than ever. While he still had high approval going into 2004, it was slipping fast, going from the 60s to the 40s in the first month alone. As election season approached, Bush thought of his pops. George H.W. Bush had also attacked Iraq and had huge support for it. Yet, he still lost his re-election. Bush Jr. was worried that history may repeat itself, and there was one man who was determined to make that happen. John Forbes Kerry was born in Colorado in 1943. His mother was a member of the wealthy Forbes family, so growing up, John was quite the fortunate son. Wink. Despite this, after attending Yale, he joined the Navy and went to Vietnam. I'm starting to see a pattern here. He served as an officer on River Patrol Swift boats, a notably dangerous job, considering when it was all done, he got a bronze medal, a silver medal, and 3 Purple Hearts. And while this would make him a hero, after being nearly killed and injured 3 times, he realized that war actually really sucks. He became a leading voice in the anti-war movement, testifying before the Foreign Relations Committee on war crimes that veterans had confessed to. This would make him very popular to some and very unpopular to others. After a run as a lawyer, in '82 he was elected Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts, and only 2 years later to the Senate. While there, he fought for veteran benefits, led probes on banking scandals, and would look into if there were any prisoners still in Vietnam. After decades in the Senate and failures in Iraq, Kerry decided to be the new Clinton and trim the Bush down to 1 term. But it wouldn't be easy. Unlike Bush, Kerry had to go through his party's primary. Even though major names like Gore, Clinton, Biden, and even Gray Davis refused to run, the former Vermont Governor Howard Dean was the clear frontrunner. He was the first to announce his candidacy, built the first grassroots online way of raising money, and his fiery opposition to Bush gained him early supporters. John Edwards, a young senator from North Carolina, was also a frontrunner. This may genuinely be the most boring set of names ever on a ballot. Kerry's campaign was not off to a good start and seemed like it was going to collapse before the primaries even started. And yet, he pulled a major upset victory at the Iowa caucus. Dean ended up 3rd, but he wasn't demoralized. During his concession speech, he let out a mighty war cry to energize his supporters.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House! Yeah!
This moment would become a massive joke, being played endlessly in the media. The Dean lean scream was a premature meme that, if seen from a modern sheen, would have increased his lean in the political scene. Instead, Dean never recovered from the "I have a scream" speech, leaving Kerry to sweep up the nomination. He picked John Edwards to be his running mate, but only after John McCain, the Republican, turned him down. I guess we're not in the silliest timeline after all. At the Democrat National Convention, the keynote address was given by some random Illinois state senator, I guess? I don't know, it's probably a snooze fest. But the whole convention basically revolved around Kerry's military service. It was his biggest strength. Democrats were often seen as weak on national security. They hoped Kerry's military experience would prove that they could defend the country during wartime and handle Iraq far better. He promised to restore trust in the White House and never mislead the US into war. He accused Bush of abusing the Constitution, selling out the middle class, and abandoning troops overseas. He believed in healthcare reform, abortion rights, and gay rights, just not to marriage. It's 2004 after all, let's not be crazy. He would leave the convention in July with a lead in the polls. What should have been a slam dunk election for W now looked like a repeat of 2000. The race was on. If there's one thing you need to know about this election, and the early 2000s as a whole, it's that people were terrified of terrorism. Anyone who grew up in this time knows exactly what I'm talking about. Along with Iraq, defense and foreign policy were the biggest issues of the campaign. Both candidates needed to prove that they were the ones who could protect the country and handle the wars. So what was old W doing this whole time? Well, to the annoyance of his party, not much. He was the incumbent with no competition, and he had 2 wars and a sputtering economy to deal with. So like a drama farming streamer, W was happy to let his opponent squabble while he raked in the donos. But soon, with slipping poll numbers, he had to start the fight. He was a very different man than the one who had ran in 2000. Daddy's silly little Texan was silly no more. He led America through its worst attack in decades and 2 wars. While he couldn't play the role of political outsider anymore, he thought his record would speak for itself. His policies had already taken shape. People knew what his whole deal was, so the only thing left was the thing that he was best at, making his opponent look stupid. He began going after Kerry before he was even the nominee. One of Kerry's biggest weaknesses that I conveniently forgot to mention was that he actually voted for the Iraq War, but then he voted against funding it. It seemed Kerry often changed his mind on policy, from war to taxes to trade. Bush framed him as a flip-flopper, someone who couldn't be trusted to be a steady leader like him. He argued that Democrats only criticized him, but never said what they would do better. Oh, well, if you're so smart, how would you have invaded Iraq? Kerry had the edge when it came to economic and domestic policy, so Bush had to try to make the campaign as much about homeland security as he could. The only crack in his armor was Kerry's military service. Kerry framed himself as the savior of the overstretched soldiers who were being led incompetently. He claimed that Bush had no plan to actually win the peace, and as a vet would be able to lead the wars far better. Bush knew he needed to change the narrative. If Republicans could strike at Kerry's military service, his biggest strength, they could severely undercut him. And lucky for W, he didn't even have to do it. Campaign ads can always be brutal, but this elections were so bad that they had to come up with a new word for it. Though each side had their feel-good, I approve this message slop, independent groups were free to get nasty. And one group in particular would really rock the boat. Literally. The Swift Boat Veterans for Truth were an anti-Kerry group of Vietnam vets who were mad at him over his testimonies back in the day. Their viral ads and best-selling book saw veterans accuse Kerry of being dishonorable and lying about his service to get his medals. Some were even Kerry's former commanders. They dredged up old American divisions over Vietnam, whether the war was right or wrong, whether Kerry betrayed his comrades by speaking out. It reinforced the thought that Democrats were weak on war and national security. It turned one of Kerry's strengths into a scandal, and his lead was erased. The term swift boating has now become synonymous with particularly grimy smearing of a candidate, something other veterans have been trying to wipe away for years. And that wasn't all. People worried that Kerry was too liberal, yet trying to tone down his views just led to more people calling him a flip-flopper. It's safe to say the attacks on his character were working. Kerry's campaign struggled, and Bush Bush pulled ahead, but he was having problems of his own. The Republican convention at the end of August laid out Bush's platform: decisive leadership, the No Child Left Behind Act, and national security. Bush explained his new ownership society, which, among other things, encouraged and gave benefits to people buying houses. I'm sure that won't backfire. Speakers like John McCain and the Terminator rallied the crowds, but not all the crowds were for them. Major protests were held right outside, with over 1,800 people being arrested and Bush's acceptance speech being interrupted by them twice. Though he came out of it with a lead in the polls, Bush wasn't safe from attacks on his service either. People suggested that he dodged Vietnam by joining the National Guard, that he received preferential treatment, or that he just sucked at being a pilot. In fact, CBS News' 60 Minutes aired a segment with documents written by Bush's commander that verified these claims. But turns out they were forgeries, which basically ended the career of their best journalist and massively embarrassed them. The new widespread use of broadband internet made the online world faster and more accessible to the masses, allowing for some of the first viral videos to pop up. And the internet's key feature of never taking anything seriously ever was already in full effect. Hell, they already ruined one campaign. But before the dreaded plague of the algorithm, videos had to be sent through email, meaning only the cream of the crop went viral, particularly ones from animation studio JibJab. Their two comedy videos for the election told every campaign joke imaginable. Bush was stupid, Kerry looked like Frankenstein, Bush was controlled by oil companies, Kerry was married to a ketchup baron, which I never mentioned. They became a nationwide hit and some of the first viral videos. It skyrocketed the small animation studio to stardom, which they have since turned into a terrible paste-your-face postcard service that your family would make you do. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Bush entered the debate still up 14 points on Kerry, whose campaign was starting to look like that one dog that's in everyone's life who looks like they're gonna be put down any day now, you know the one. Bush was finally back in his natural habitat, not to mention the first debate would be all about foreign policy. But he was no longer Governor Bush, and John Kerry was not Al Gore. Bush didn't seem as sharp as he used to be, as seen through his Bushisms on the campaign trail.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
And the first debate would only prove it, as Kerry decisively beat him. Though the debate didn't have many gotcha moments, probably because the moderator immediately asked Kerry how he'd stop 9/11 too, people thought Kerry had a better understanding of the facts. He came across as more confident and likable than the president, a complete flip of the script from 2000. The aloof, out-of-touch persona Republicans had worked so hard to give him was now shattered. Bush did better in the second debate, but still not better than Kerry. And the third debate was all about domestic policy, where Kerry still had the edge. When it was all said and done, Kerry won every debate. He was now far more trusted on the economy and healthcare than Bush. He said that he could make America safer than Bush, that America had lost its international respect, that the economy and rising unemployment would lead to disaster. Bush was still seen as the man when it came to toughness, but he spent most of the debates defending what he'd done, rather than talking about what he would do. It was his election to lose, and he was throwing it like Matt Ryan. Kerry was now the front runner, and heading into election week, it seemed the Bushes were doomed to be one-term presidents. But wait, who is that? Oh my god, Osama bin Laden! Just 4 days before the election, news channel Al Jazeera released a video of Osama bin Laden, the first in nearly 3 years. He talked directly to the American people, telling them it didn't matter who they chose for president. US policies hadn't changed, so Al-Qaeda would attack them again. It was the first time he directly claimed responsibility for 9/11. He laid out his reasons and made fun of Bush's response. Both Bush and Kerry strongly condemned the message, promising that they would be the ones to bring justice to the terrorists. The Kerry campaign had tried for months to stop the campaign from just being about 9/11. Yet now, in the final days, that's exactly what it became. W now had the boost going into Election Day. On November 2nd, Americans around the country hit the now mostly electronic voting booths. Over 122 million people voted, nearly 17 million more than in 2000. The polls were close, and with each state called, the race got closer. Kerry won the Northeast, the West Coast, and most of the Great Lakes, while Bush won, well, you know, everything else. And yet again, for the second election in a row, it all came down to one battleground state. But not Florida, oh no. The only state funnier than Florida, Ohio. Yet to everyone's relief, this time it wouldn't be decided by a few hundred votes, but by 100,000. Bush managed to pull out a win in Ohio, securing the Electoral College 286 to 251, with one faithless elector in Minnesota voting for John Edwards. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They wrote in John Ewards. That is really funny. And while there would be a few lawsuits filed for discrimination, and the guy in charge of certifying Ohio's votes was Bush's campaign chair again, I don't know how you let that happen twice, Kerry conceded. In his concession speech, he emphasized the need for reuniting and healing in the country. It wouldn't be all bad for Kerry, though. He'd go on to be the Secretary of State under Obama and the presidential envoy for climate under Biden. John Edwards would become a Democrat star and a frontrunner for the 2008 presidency. Of course, until it was revealed that he was covering up an affair and a secret child with a campaign staffer, all while his wife was dying of cancer, completely destroying his family and career. So not all winners in the end. Bush, on the other hand, surely breathed a heavy sigh of relief. He defeated Clinton and Gore, invaded Iraq, and won a second term. He'd finally truly avenged his father. And with that, he was free to begin his second term. One that was far more peaceful and uneventful, and I'm just kidding, I'm gonna be talking about this dude's presidency until the day I die, probably in the Middle East. Like and subscribe, bye bye.